Hey guys, EST here, and the rabbits are eating my bean plants, and the squirrels are digging up my potatoes. This is unacceptable. They started the war, but I'm going to end it. But since I can't legally own grenades, we're going to do the next best thing and put up a physical barrier. So I really just didn't want to spend 20 bucks on wooden stakes at the hardware store when I just cut down a tree, and then I thought this could be a video. But wait, I don't know woodworking, or whatever you would consider this to be. But then I thought, that's the point. Let's say society collapsed yesterday, and I've got my beans and potatoes, which is almost entirely what's in that garden, and we've got just limited seeds from last year and the potatoes from my kitchen. So every single one lost is less seeds for next year and less to eat, less to preserve over the winter, and that's not good because I need those to survive. So that was like the premise, and then I thought, okay, also no internet, you can't look up how to do this. Let's just take things that I know or have vaguely heard, see if they work, see if I can do this without it being a disaster. So come along with me and let's find out. So I thought, hey, it would be easier if I take a little hand hatchet, which was dirt cheap, and get rid of all these little side shoots because, it'll be harder to bend over, and it really doesn't do anything other than cosmetic and safety, so you could leave these on, but I'd really hate to trip and fall on them. Now, we definitely can't have a bottom like that with that fork because that would never stick in the ground. So I thought, okay, let's just try and chop it, put a little cut into it. And I want some angles because obviously I wanted pointy enough to be able to go into the ground. Now, those are really light hits because if you go absolutely full force, the way this is kind of bouncing and flexing, it could be really bad. And I found out that if I do it any harder, I could just absolutely split it and have to start over. It basically knocks off the thin part. So I tried this with a knife off camera and it was just absolutely not happening. So that's why we did such wimpy swings. I'm actually trying to be subtle with a not so subtle tool. So despite being incredibly dead and dry from a dying but standing tree that I just took down, these were really springing, so I thought let's put them on a hard surface instead of on the ground. There you go. Now, I did improve this later, but wow, did this make it better because I was getting so much bounce off those swings that it just felt dangerous. So I did eventually get this one really pointy, as you can see. So I wanted to preserve these as long as possible. I know they're going to last one season no matter what, but what's going to keep that wood from very quickly breaking down when it's effectively under the soil? And I know they used to treat playground lumber with arsenic, which that's, bad, and I didn't have any, nor would I do that right next to my garden. So I thought, well, it at least has to be as dry as possible. But then I thought, wait a minute, instead of just drying it, why don't I put it in the fire and just char the whole outside, basically burn it? You know why perfectly cooked meat tastes better than burned meat? It's because burned meat doesn't have any calories or anything useful in it. And that concept applies to any kind of subterranean nasties trying to eat this wood. So I eventually actually just rolled it in the ash as well because the ashes are pretty basic and strong bases and strong acids are a good way to preserve just about anything. Plus, I thought I saw like a million years ago that somebody used to do this. Like I said, no internet searches allowed. We're going grid down, just, hey, this might work, let's try it. So please do comment on if this was a completely bonkers idea, a great idea, or, basically did nothing. So I pounded the stakes into the ground with this hammer. Obviously, you may or may not have that. And it turns out such a small, round, blunt area trying to hit such a small stick is kind of like dangerous. It's hard to get a good swing because you think, ooh, if I miss, I'm breaking my wrist. So it actually would have been probably a better, safer idea to use a big, flat, heavy rock. I could have gotten a good pound going with that. I mean, I'd probably need two hands on it potentially, but then I could, in theory, just have somebody hold it. So I didn't have a ton of options for sticks. This is the thinnest and the most crooked one. And every time I hit it, even with that little bend in it, it just kind of recoiled a little bit and bounced just a little bit. And that moss on there means this has been dead but hanging for a while. About half the tree was extremely dead and the other half was pretty dead. So not ideal. All of this would have actually been easier if it was green, except for, then you're destroying green parts of a living tree. Not that I care about one tree over my life and protecting my food in my garden. So the other ones went into the ground immensely easier than this one. Also, after I got the much heavier hammer, I noticed that, if I hit it any harder, I'm just going to snap it. So that bend was really annoying, and I definitely appear to have hit some kind of massive rock. It seemed stable enough. I thought, well, okay, this will be the one I redo. And then I never really had to. It held just fine. I'm still not thrilled with it, but I might put another one next to it, pound it in way deeper. We were definitely already losing the daylight. But that's fine because even at night, I was sweating. This was hard work. So I found a better surface for this, my axe splitting log. Turns out you could probably hit this with an axe from space and it wouldn't split this thing. I don't know what it's made out of, I assume magic. but it makes a darn good splitting log to put other logs on top of. Also, it's heavy and there's concrete under it. I wanted absolutely no absorption of the energy, and as you can see before, I pounded that thing into the dirt of my lawn a couple inches, and the swings were losing their energy because of that. So use a stump or a stone for sure. It turns out trying to hold it upright-ish and then swing at an angle is really stupid, awkward, and kept kind of bouncing off. But if I hit it too hard or too high, I think I do it right about here, we split off the whole bottom and I had to start over. So you want to start high and go down because, you want the finest point. But then again, it doesn't have to be an arrow, it doesn't have to be a weapon, lower the swing. And then I realized, why don't I just put the stick at 45 degrees and then swing straight up and down? And that worked so much better for the future ones. So I cannot stress how impossible this would have been to do with a knife. And you're not going to get it to a good enough point with an axe, like to be a weapon, to be an actual spear. However, it was good enough to go in the ground. So I got this one at least like a 2-to-1 reduction. Still a little blunt, but it wasn't too bad. It turns out starting at 0 is kind of stupid, but I couldn't snap one of these just by like putting on the ground and body weight. But if you do, you start out with one that's already like really split the long way in all likelihood. So that already made my job 10 times easier. So if you can, find one where, it's 8 feet tall, and then you can just grab it, jam it into the ground, kind of press it out like a bow and wait for it to snap. And then when it snaps at the weakest point on the bottom usually, now you've already got a pointed area. In fact, if you didn't have a hatchet or a knife, you could pretty much just do it that way. A lot of those were sharp enough. Now to get a flat top and to actually start with a point as well, I cut it this way with a bow saw, and then the top, like I said, was completely flat. So the next day we got them all in the ground, as you can see here. A lot of them were a lot straighter, and the lack of bends made them go into the ground so much easier. Some of these are like a foot to a foot and a half into the ground. They are going nowhere. Now, did I need to go that far? Probably not. We're only trying to keep out rabbits, not like something bigger. But hey, the sturdier the better. Now here's where it gets controversial. Yes, that is man/factory made, not chicken wire. I think it's actually called like bunny blocker. I had it laying around, but I will say you could definitely scavenge that as well as the plastic zip ties I was using. Otherwise, it doesn't have to hold back a rhino. It just has to not easily let a large, awkward jumping rabbit through it. Squirrels, I mean, they can climb and stuff. They're probably going to get in here if they really wanted. But I'll tell you, any farm or any rural house, at least in my state, that has any kind of garden, they've got rolls of this because people buy it off season. I actually got this a couple of years ago at an estate auction. So we went to somebody else's house who had 5 rolls of it and bought it for like $3. So you're going to find this. If you can't, you're probably going to have to build it. And what house in America doesn't have plastic zip ties? But that could easily just be any kind of rope. It could be paracord. It could just be a vine. I mean, like I said, this has to hold back like a 1-pound rabbit. Now, there's not that many species of vine in my area of the country, but there is one. It likes to climb buildings and fences, and it's currently covering the fence on purpose. My neighbors actually did this as free cover on a metal chain link fence. So I took a sample of it because it was climbing my tree anyway. And yeah, it would have wrapped around perfectly. I would just loop it around once on the sticks and then keep going. I wouldn't even like weave it. But if I had to take like really green thin branches, like new growth, cut them as long as I possibly can, and then just plant about double to triple the number of stakes, I actually could have gotten away with that, kind of like a basket weave. But the big difference is anything other than what I did would start blocking immense amounts of sunlight for the first couple hours of the day, which, okay, it's not as intense, but if you've already got shading from trees or buildings or just anything else, yeah, you're going to want the maximum amount of sunlight. So this was the final version. I did add 2 little guards when I realized there's a gap there, and well, animals are kind of programmed to look for like the same trails, and then they all take the same ones and kind of make like what's called a game trail. So they'd say, hey, this looks like a gap right there. Let's see if I can jump through it. And then I might as well not even have a fence at all. Now, the first one I completely cut incorrectly. I could have just cut out the bottom. Instead, I was completely lapsing in attention and really thinking about making the video, and I cut the top instead. So, oops. Could have been one piece, but it's fine. I put on like 8 wire ties, so it should be fine. So this is a lot better than the free rabbit all-you-can-eat buffet. Something might be able to get in, something might be able to squeeze through, something still might be able to, like dig it up, but 1 or 2 chipmunks versus anything that could just hop up there, that's a big improvement. I can still reach over at the top if it's not very sharp, and all the tops of the sticks, in case I trip and fall, are blunt. So this took a couple hours. Actually, obviously shot this over 2 days, but that was a lot of experimenting and, picking out the best 6, but you'd have to do that anyway. But really, that once I've done it once, I could do it 4 times faster. That's true with a lot of projects. And then I had to build the fire, then wait for the fire to be built, and, just turned into a whole drawn-out thing. It was moderately physical. It's not like I was just hauling firewood or water, but boy, was I sweating, and it wasn't, that hot out. So definitely hard work, but, if your food is at risk, do it ahead of time or do it as quickly as possible. If you're scavenging, start looking for chicken wire, or really anything similar, before it becomes a problem. I've learned, okay, the rabbits do eat this, they don't eat that. They like beans, they don't like cilantro, they can't eat potato leaves because I believe they're toxic to everything. But that's a stupid way to learn a lesson. What I learned last year is that the old adage of if you're having pest problems, just assume that pests are going to ruin, 10% of it in a healthy balance, and, they just use the plant for whatever, laying eggs or something. And just plant more. I planted 50 bean plants, and all 50 got eaten by multiple rabbits. I have a feeling they would have ripped up an entire field of these. Bean sprouts, especially with the beans coming up on the stem, are so unbelievably nutritious. Yeah, they're just gonna focus on that all day. So you can't always just plant past the pests. And trust me, with rabbits, unless you can sit out there 24/7, you cannot shoot them all. So I could start listing all the different alternate materials you could use. It all depends on your area. Like I said, you could do it with some kind of vine. If you live in a tropical area, you could just use banana leaves, or, you could use rhubarb leaves, technically. Those stay pretty stiff for a while. You'd have to replace them. Or any kind of vine or thin green thing and just kind of weave it. You've seen that kind of primitive building before. But this was faster and easier, and wire ties were easier and faster than using rope. So don't just say, oh, I've got rope, I can build anything. Sometimes, you need to throw in a couple wire ties just in case, especially if you also have a tarp in your, secondary emergency bag. And, if the sticks aren't straight or the top's not flat, it makes it really dangerous and really hard. So do your best to do that. Little pocket saw, those finger saws where you got, the 2 K-rings and you go between it. That's a good way to do it. And then just a big flat rock, preferably one that you can hold in one hand. And concentrate on everything you're doing, because as soon as I lapsed into tension, got myself a little scratch with the saw, or oops, I accidentally got a little poke from the chicken wire. You got to be careful, because I actually really had to patch some stuff up when I went inside. Nothing major, but I did put some antibiotic on it, and then I took a shower. 2 things that I might not be able to do if there's a grid down scenario. Or just an economic downturn. Now, speaking of that, last thing I'm going to say on this is, this obviously doesn't keep thieves or, humans out. Motion-activated ultra-bright solar lights are a thing, but in a scenario like that, they're not afraid you're going to call the cops, and they're starving, so they're going to take all your stuff. So gardens are actually a terrible idea unless you know that there's nobody around. If there's nobody around, you could start slashing outside windows and cutting off screens. Yeah, just window screens. That material, if you can get it between the sticks, space about perfectly, that'll keep anything out. It's just a lot harder to secure. Now, if you've been screaming at the screen, hey, why don't you just use a raised garden? Because that biome collapses really easily without synthetic fertilizers or real specific organic stuff. There's no worms, there's no nothing, there's nothing coming up from the soil. It just kind of is what it is. I contaminated mine to liven it up a little bit with, scoops of really deep stuff from my existing compost piles, my lawn, and my garden. So it has some bacteria and fungi in it, but at a certain point, unless I'm bokashi composting or something, raised gardens are just going to turn into sand and clay and stuff that, nothing can grow in. Unless you can keep mixing it with compost, and even then, I've just seen plants do so much better with so much room and better roots in the ground. So realistically, you wouldn't even have this nice edge for a partially raised garden. It would just be slightly uphill mounds of dirt that you kind of got together, mixed with some whatever. It looked kind of black and not like clay, so you're maybe something will grow in this. But before this just becomes the gardening tips video, that's about all there is to this cool build. So if you have any improvements, or you know way more about wood and structures than I do, which you probably do, let me know how I did and if there's anything I could have improved on. And I'll see you guys next video.